for Archdeacon Justine. So that will appear, that will fill your screen when it appears, when Archdeacon Mike screen shares. And 2 pieces of music will also be played during the course of the presentation. So please be aware of that. And I'm very grateful to Archdeacon Mike for his technical skills and support today with this. Just keeping my eye on the waiting room. I think it would be good to hand over to Bishop June at this point to give a welcome, if that's okay, Bishop.
Yeah. Welcome to everybody. Really glad to see you all. It's so frustrating to see you all on screen and not be able to chat to you, but it's still a delight. And the subject of the morning was risk assessments. The archdeacons were telling us that they've had lots and lots of risk assessments to deal with over the weekend. And I think Penru Khyber beat everybody to opening their doors this morning. But so we're in a particular moment where life begins to look as if it'll open up, and I know there's lots on your mind. So thank you very much indeed for making this a priority. And I want to say a huge welcome to Archdeacon Justine Alain Chapman, who we're going to put ourselves into her hands in a moment. It's so generous of you, Justine, to join the Diocese of Llandaff for this afternoon. We're looking forward to it hugely.
I only wish I were in Wales and not flat Lincolnshire.
We wish you were in Wales as well, but we're going to get quite a lot of the power of your communication and the message that you've got for us. For those of you who don't know Justine, I suspect, Justine, you overlapped with Peggy at some stage in the Diocese of Southwark, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah. Well, Justine was a teacher at one stage. She taught religious education, and went after ordination. She did a curacy in Forest Hill, I believe, if I remember rightly, and then was vicar in Clapham. She then went on to the staff of the South East Institute for Theological Education, where I was once a governor of the institute. Justine was both the vice principal and the director of mission and pastoral studies. But she's now translated to Lincolnshire. She's the Archdeacon of Boston in Lincolnshire. And Justine, it's such a pleasure to have you. I'm not going to take any more of your time. We're going to hand over to you. But thank you, a profound thank you from all of us.
Well, it's lovely to be here, and I can just imagine myself. I have Welsh blood in me, and so it's. And I relatively recently was on retreat at St David's, so it's lovely to feel those links that we share with one another. My pet hobby has been resilience, the theme that I realise has defined much of my life and much of my ministry. And when I had the chance, when I was in theological education, to study for a professional doctorate, I chose to look at resilience, i.e. the overcoming of adversity in such a way that you are strengthened. So if you imagine a rubber ball, it being bounced down on the ground, and if I were there, I would kind of do it. If you imagine it, the ball would be squished and deformed under the pressure. And then as the pressure was off, it came up. It would become spherical again, and it would have energy to go forward. When adversity hits us, we get under pressure and we're squished and we're out of shape and we have to reform, recover. But resilience is more than that. Resilience is about being strengthened in order to go forward. And as human beings and as Christians and as clergy, we are under various pressures, internal pressures, external pressures, and we can get out of shape in spiritual and mental and no doubt physical ways. I don't know what lockdown has been doing for you. Somebody told me you either become a chunk, a hunk, or a drunk. So I leave it to you to decide which one that is, which out of shapeness is there for you. So what I want to do this afternoon with you is to look at the life of St. Peter as a resilient disciple. And should any of you be interested, I've written a Lent book, 40 reflections on Lent, for Lent, called The Resilient Disciple, and some of what I'm saying is shot through in that book. And I've written another book for pastors called Resilient Pastors. So resilient. So if Mike would be so kind as to share the screen, the first slide, you'll just see it says St. Peter the Resilient Disciple, and you will see that the kind of backdrop that I have got is kind of gold, a sort of gold lines. Now I'm hoping that you'll be able to see my face as well. If you've got active speaker, you should be able to, but do pitch in, anybody, if you can see that. If you can't, because I just want to show you a picture of this bowl, which you might be able to see. And if Mike would go to the second slide, then you'll be able to see the bowl that I'm also actually holding up. In the bottom right hand of that a picture of that slide, you can see my olive bowl. And the theme that I want us to hold through this seminar is the theme of a Japanese art form called kintsugi. So let me just tell you about kintsugi as you look at that picture of the bowl. And I don't know if you can see me, you might see that I'm showing you another bowl. And I've got several bowls here, which are kintsugi bowls. So let me tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a Japanese army commander, and the Japanese army commander broke his teacups. They weren't particularly expensive teacups, but he liked them. And he sent them to the workshop to get them mended. And when they returned from the workshop, they were put back together in quite a shoddy way. And so he sent them back again. And the craftsman mended them with gold. They held them together, they used gold lacquer, and they put them together in such a way that when they returned to the Japanese army commander, they were a set, but they were unique. Because they had broken in different places, the cracks or the lines that could now be seen as gold were gold patterns unique to each one of them. So they were also more precious because they were mended with gold, literally more valuable. Different, more valuable, unique, and they were ready to be used again. And I found that image of kintsugi a very profound one in the way in which we come through adversity well. That we come through in such a way that we are ready to be used again on the journey and of whatever that thing that has happened to us or difficulty that we have had. And currently our churches are going through a time of stress and difficulty. We all are as human beings and as clergy. What's going to come out the other side? We don't exactly know. But the marks of it can show or will show. Can they be shown in such a way that we treasure what has happened to us? Can we be seen to be mended with gold, the grace of God, the love of friends? But are we broken, or how are we broken? How have we been damaged in our own lives, in our own story? And when we look at that now, what does it look like to ourselves and to others? So let me tell you a bit about St. Peter. You can see I put on this slide, Peter, the resilient disciple. And Peter's life comes in three threes: falling, faithful, fruitful. And just as you're trawling your Bible in your mind, 3 denials, 3 do you love me's, 3 don't look upon this thing as unclean. So Peter's life has these patterns in that he has to notice. And Peter also has this particular call, and you can see I've put a stone there or a rock. And I don't know if you've noticed in your own life, you may have a strong sense of threads running through. For Peter, this call to be a rock, or this identification by Jesus of Peter as a rock, was hugely important. And yet he was also a stumbling block. He was also not the stone or the brick, as we would say, on which Jesus could rest and know that he was there for him. He sank like a stone. And you may be aware, certainly I am, that some of my greatest weaknesses are the underside or the counter to my greatest strengths. It's the things that let me down that are also the things that are my greatest strengths. And certainly with Peter and the rock, that was the case. So I just hold those for you. And let's look to falling. Let me just show you something of this journey that Peter is on, the journey that enables him to come through well, to be resilient, and not just that he does it, but how does he do it? What can we learn from Peter? So if I can have falling, the next slide, that'd be great. So there is my bowl. It's a bowl, I don't know if you can see it, it's from St Paul's Clapham. Somebody gave it to me at their 200th anniversary. And I use it for grapes and salad, and it slipped through my fingers and I dropped it. And that's what got me into kintsugi. I thought, how can I mend this in such a way to cover the breaks? How can I mend it so that I can see the gold lines like I'd seen on postcards and various things like that? So what happens to Peter? Now, you'll have been locked down the same amount of time as I have. We've been through Holy Week. We've done the 3 denials. We've been through Easter. We've had Peter meeting Jesus on the shore, and now we have also come through Pentecost, and we're well into Acts of the Apostles and going forward, and perhaps we can just see these 3 significant times in Peter's life, see them together and see him as a whole person, a resilient disciple who is a disciple all the way through, because his calling, his foundational calling to follow Jesus, is one that continues, comes back to him again and again. So next slide would be great, please. What happens to Peter is that he's the lead disciple, everything's successful, so it seems, and he wants to follow Jesus, even if it means following him into danger. But Jesus knows Peter better than he knows himself. And we know what happens. Peter follows Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, and he is challenged about who he is. He has a Galilean accent. He's not like the others. They've seen him with Jesus. And on each occasion, I always get the impression he mumbles. He says, oh no, I wasn't with him. Oh yeah, I don't know him. Or He denies he knows Jesus. It seems to me like a casual slipping out of his hands of a bowl. It seems to me that he casually, hardly thinking about it, tries to avoid danger for himself. And maybe that was the right thing to do. Who knows? Not denying Jesus, but avoiding danger might have had some sense in it. The picture I've got on the right-hand slide there is of an eclipse. And I was in northern France in late 90s, 97, I think, or was it 99, when there was an eclipse, a total eclipse of the sun. And it was really eerie. It was only a few minutes, but it was eerie to have the sun, the light, disappear. And then as the light returned, the cockerels started crowing again. And they must have been, found it extraordinary. What a short night, not really a restful sleep. But the dawn broke again, as far as they were concerned. The light went away, the light returned. And that's how I think of this incident in the life of Peter. He breaks down when he hears the break of day, the call of the break of day. The cockerel crows and Peter realizes what he has done. And the significance of that cockerel and the breaking, I think, is not just breaking down and weeping, but the cockerel symbolises a new day. What is done, but there is something new going ahead. And if you look in Luke's gospel in particular, you see Jesus saying, and when you've come through all this, return to my brothers. Jesus sees a way forward for Peter, even when Peter denies him. And we sometimes forget that. If we look to the next slide, there's a picture of a cockerel there. And I've just put a quote there from Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. It's a little bit like St. Paul talking about treasure in clay jars and the light of the knowledge of Christ that is within. And it also reminds me of the book by Richard Rohr you may have read, Falling Upwards. Richard Rohr talks about building your life, building up your successes, your competencies, your relationships, your household. That's all really, really important. But then somewhere along the line, in midlife, wherever midlife is, something that can happen, and it means that you fall, you break up, break down. There's some damage, some adversity, some difficulty which threatens. And Richard Rohr talks about that as an opportunity for falling upwards. That's the title of his book. You can fall upwards, not that it doesn't feel as if you've fallen or broken, but you begin to live life from a different place, from a more inner, compassionate to yourself kind of place. And there is a maturing and an integration, an important pattern. So if we just have the next slide. I've got a couple of questions here, and in a moment we're going to have a piece of music. We're going to have some of Leonard Cohen's anthem. And I want you to think about what kinds of falling are experienced by you as a minister, as a person, by your local church at this particular point in time, or the church as a whole, whether that's national, international, and where the wake-up calls are for you, and where the places are that the light can get in, where the cracks are. So you may want to grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen, and knowing that we are on this journey, falling, faithful, fruitful, we're going on a journey, but just to identify for you now, this year, where are the difficulties? What threatens your well-being? It might be as a person, a Christian, a minister. What threatens your well-being? And where are the cracks? Maybe they're really obvious to you. Where might light come in? Where are you seeing light come in? Where are the wake-up calls? So if Mike would be so kind as to play the slide, which has got something about
Need to unmute Mike.
I don't know whether you have a very long list of breakups and breakdowns and fallings and cracks and damage. You may do. You may have a little list. It may be a list that's just for you, and it may be a list that's all about the churches and the things that you are encountering professionally, we might say. So how do we attend to our well-being when things have gone wrong, or when we can see things are breaking apart? I mentioned that we've just, when I say just had Easter, of course we haven't just had Easter, but it feels a little bit like that to me, since I've been in the same place all the time, as we all have. And I'm thinking about that space that is Holy Saturday. That space where Peter enters into a new day. The cockerel crows. It is a new day, and it's the day we call Holy Saturday. And what does Peter do? Well, he goes fishing. He doesn't really mind whether lots of people go with him or whether they don't. The disciples sort of say they want to come and they end up going. But he does something really significant. He gets in touch with where he's come from, with who he is. And he does something physical and rhythmic, the rowing, the sailing, the fishing, that grounds him in his body. We've got a lot of park runs around, not just now, but have had. And lots of people on a Sunday morning seem to go running together. And I think there's something very spiritual and very grounding about running, about doing something together in a rhythmic way. I certainly know that when I run or walk, I can get in touch with what I feel and what I think in a way that I can't always sitting in a seat and saying my prayers. And there are times when I need to make sense of how I feel, and I don't know how even to feel, but I know there's stuff there. And that doing something physical, doing something rhythmic, like walking or fishing or rowing or cycling, is hugely important. So that's what Peter does. He just puts his sign on the door, like I've put the sign on mine, and said, I'm taking some space out, the space that is Holy Saturday. And in doing so, he's enabled to face what's gone on and who he is. And people often talk about resilience as being 3 C's. C for coping, C for constant, C for construction. First of all, when things happen, you just have to cope. Lockdown, just have to find ways of coping. And then you have to retain who you are, be constant, and work out who you are and where you're at. And then you reconstruct, you construct, coping, constant, constructing. So what Peter does is he seeks a way of coping, which is taking time out and going off, going fishing. The next slide shows us a picture of Peter remembering. What he does is he goes back to the place where he first met Jesus. Whether he realises that or not, we don't know. He goes back home. He goes back to his old way of life. He actually goes back to where it all started. And he realises, I think, I love this picture because it's a picture of Peter remembering that Christ has pulled him through before. He's failed before. And perhaps the denial of Christ for Peter is as much his own coming to terms with his own failure as anything else. After all, had Peter not denied Jesus 3 times, Jesus would still have been crucified. It's not all about Peter in terms of crucifixion. But Peter realises that he's been here before. He remembers Christ has pulled him through. Christ has reached out, he has reached out. And he has this chance of returning to where he first met Jesus. So falling, let's move to faithful. When I broke my bowl, I needed to find all the bits, and I needed to hold them together and glue them and hold them together for quite a long period of time. And I don't know if you're aware of this, you will be aware of this, I'm sure, that when things have gone wrong and things have broken up or broken down, there are a lot of sharp edges around, a lot of people with sharp edges, which can be quite painful and brutalising for others around them, including us as pastors and clergy. And when you hold something together again, you hold it together, it'll kind of fit, but there may be notches which don't fit anymore or are visible. And if you hold the bowl too tightly, then it slips and won't stick together. And if you don't hold it firmly enough, then it won't glue together either. You have to hold for long enough with the right kind of pressure. And on the next slide, you can see those words that Jesus asks Peter, do you love me more than these? And you remember Peter's gone fishing. He hasn't caught any fish, neither of the other disciples. He sees a stranger on the shore, and Jesus makes them breakfast. It's always important to have a good meal inside you, to attend to the physical if you're going to have an important conversation with somebody. That's probably why the bishop always gives you biscuits when she invites you to a meeting. I don't know that, I'm just making that up or suggesting that kind of hospitality can be resourcing for you, for her, for everyone over difficult conversations. So once they've had their breakfast, Jesus asks Peter, do you love me more than these? And I'm not going to go on about whether the these is the other disciples or the nets or the fishing or anything. Just that Jesus gets to the heart of the question, the heart of the matter. And he does it in such a way that it doesn't grind Peter into the ground, demanding an apology, nor does it indicate that what Peter has done doesn't matter to Jesus, doesn't matter to Peter. And Peter answers, as we know, 3 times, yes, yes, I do. And then, you know everything, Lord. You know that I love you. And on the next slide, you'll see a statue of Jacob and the angel. And this was quite near to where I was a vicar in the Tate Britain. This Epstein sculpture is in the foyer. It's much bigger than I am. You don't know how tall I am, but I'm not particularly tall. But this is very big. So this is, I don't know, probably 8 foot tall or so. And every time I go, I always walk all the way round it. And I try to look in between, because when I look at this statue, I don't know whether the angel is holding Jacob, who can't stand up on his own and is weak. I don't know whether there's an embrace, a mutual embrace, or whether there's a vice-like grip. I don't know at what point we are in the struggle and in the holding. But it very much evokes in me that relationship of faithfulness of Christ to Peter on that holy time after the shore, so on the shore. And one of the things that I know through the research I've done into resilience is when stuff has gone wrong or stuff is difficult, embracing the struggle is really, really important. Not being passive before the Lord, but to embrace the struggle. And that being held and holding makes a difference. That naming makes a difference. And you'll remember that Jacob is named in this encounter. And being marked, difficulty, adversity marks us. And Jacob forever limps because of this wrestling that has gone on between him and the angel. So when Jesus asks Peter, do you love me more than these? I think he holds him really, really carefully. I imagine it as one of those 2 o'clock in the morning conversations when you don't really know whether the relationship with your lover is going to last or not. You can imagine it's all going to come to nothing. But if the dynamics go well enough, there can be a holding, a naming, a compassion, a love, the heart of the matter. And that's what happens with Peter and Jesus. So then we move on in that story. There's another slide, and you can see the labyrinth there at Chartres. Because what Jesus says to Peter is, you're going to suffer again. You lost control when you denied me. You always think you're in control and you're not, and you'll lose it again, to the extent that when you're older, somebody else will guide you and lead you, tie your belt, take you where you do not want to go. And Peter doesn't like this idea. And so he points, as you know, to the beloved disciple and says, well, what about him? And Jesus says, what Jesus has always said to Peter, follow me. And I've given you that image of the labyrinth. I went to the labyrinth. They only go on Friday mornings because that's when they uncover it. And I walked the labyrinth, and you can probably see, if you've got the screen's big enough, you can probably do it yourself on the screen here. It takes about 40 minutes to do the whole thing. And it's, you know, it's big and lots of people go onto it, and you can go all the way through into the middle. Anyway, I started the labyrinth barefoot. And you know what? Sometimes I was really close to the edge, to the centre. I was close to the centre and I felt really smug, especially when I realised that I was ahead of some other people who I thought had been ahead of me. And then on other occasions, I was right around the edge. And it really wasn't fair because I was so far away from the centre and other people had started after me and they looked as if they were finishing. And for me, walking the labyrinth was a lesson in recognising that I was on my journey and I just had to get on with my journey. And I was accompanied. And then at times people just disappeared. And there were people ahead of me, some people who I bumped into, and that was really irritating. And people who at the edges said lots of sort of long involved prayers, which just held everybody else up. And this labyrinth for me drew me into its centre and out again, and was a lesson about following Christ, whether you feel at the edge or whether you feel at the centre, whoever's ahead of you, whoever's behind you. And that's what Peter needed to learn, that Christ was faithful to him, asking him 3 times, do you love me? And his role was to follow whatever was to emerge later. So moving from follow me to fruitfulness. And the thing I love about this kintsugi image, this Japanese bowl, is that it's ready to be used again. Sometimes when we've been through something difficult or someone else has, we're content to recover, but then somehow to sit on a shelf. But the kintsugi image is very much one where you're ready to be used again, and the breaks, the cracks, the damage become treasured and precious, and the stuff that inspires other people. And that you can see the breaks on this bowl, you can see the break where the break was, but at first, unless you knew it was a break, you might just see a beautiful gold line. So Peter becomes a healer and a preacher and a teacher. He becomes a pillar of the church, and he carries on following Jesus, but he is aware of the patterns of his life to the extent that one day he's hungry, he's praying on the roof, and if we have the next slide, he sees a tablecloth coming down and non-kosher food in it, and a voice says, take, kill and eat. And he says, no, I'm a good Jew, I will not eat non-kosher food. And a voice says to him, what God has made clean, you must not call profane. And it happens 3 times. And it may be that you can look over your own life and see patterns that mean you have to be alert and take notice, or you ought to be alert and take notice because God is speaking to you in such a way. You may be aware in the life of your churches of patterns which are wounded history patterns, vicious cycles, but when they come round again are invitations for change, for healing, for God to speak into them. So, as you remember, Peter sees this vision, hears these words about what is clean and what is unclean, goes down the stairs, and he sees Cornelius' servants, Cornelius a Gentile, saying that Cornelius has had a vision that Peter will come and preach, and Peter goes and preaches the good news of God in Jesus Christ. And it's quite clear that Cornelius and all his household receive the Holy Spirit without Peter having to touch them. It is a gift of God. And Peter's heart expands, and he is able to include those he thought would never be included in the kingdom of heaven, which is why I've got put those hands and the heart shape amongst them. So we have the next slides, and I've just got a little series of slides now that I want to just invite you to think about where you're at, how you might be ready to be used again after whatever adversity, difficulty has come your way. You may be looking a long time in the past, you may be looking at the present, you may be looking for yourself or for a situation or for your church community. But what Peter discovered was that he had the call he had always had, follow me, and he developed a new call, feed my sheep. He shifted from evangelist to pastor. Now we know at the moment, everybody tells us we should be shifting from pastors to evangelists. There's a way of doing both and doing them differently, and that's what Peter does really. But he is very clearly called to fish for people and use those transferable skills of being a fisherman to now feeding sheep, to being a pastor, because to be a good pastor, you have to have been there and come through with faith and with love and with hope, which is what Peter does. So looking there as a snapshot, what happens to Peter? Peter becomes a healer. The young fisherman who rushes into the sea to try to walk on the water is not a healer, but the Peter who has come through resiliently, if you like, being strengthened by God's grace through the difficulties of his life and his faith, comes through as someone who can heal people who are sick. He comes through as someone who can be humble. St. Peter and St. Paul have something of a rocky relationship. We can see in the pages of the New Testament. And Peter does create space for St. Paul also to be, or to become, the apostle to the Gentiles, echoing Peter's own vision. And then Peter leads with wisdom, the keys of the kingdom. He has keys, not just one, but different keys needed for different occasions like we do, to unlock hearts, to unlock wisdom, to be unlocked by God for something new. And he becomes that pillar of the church, that pillar that this Peter Tide, presumably in Llandaff, just like in Lincoln, there are no ordinations at Peter Tide, but there are ordinands preparing for ordination, following in the pattern of St. Peter. And the real shift that comes for Peter, I think, is this shift that we started off when we thought about the pattern of 3 and falling, of a man who was fearful to follow Jesus into a dangerous situation. And in Acts 12, we have that peculiar story of Peter being imprisoned and being rescued by an angel. We're unsure of whether it's really happening or not really happening, and he's clearly unsure as to what's happening or not. But it's a story of freedom. And the freedom is the freedom within for Peter. He's come through well to such an extent that he understands that he can be arrested, he can be crucified now, and he is free to live without a debilitating fear. Not that he would never be frightened, not that he would never screw up again, but that he has the courage to follow Christ into the darkest situations, knowing that he can be held, that he can come through, and that there will be fruits. So I've got another piece of music to play. It is The Lord's My Shepherd by which. So where's your vocation? Oh, you can stop.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord
For the next 10 minutes, those who are capable of doing this are going to put you into groups to be able to just have a conversation about anything that I've said, but I've suggested a couple of things that you might want to talk about for 10 minutes, after which, when we come back into this space together, we can, you may have questions of me or observations that you want to make. So there'll be a bit of time for that. So this is This is the last slide. Let me just say, so these are just two things that you might want to think about. You might want to think about the shift of vocation, this deepening on maturity that Peter experiences in such a way that he grows in faith, grows in resilience, and his well-being comes from within, if you like. The dangers continue. You might want to think about conversations which can heal. And I've put the Jacob and the Epstein, Jacob and the angel. How might your style of bringing about apologies be open to bringing about healing? I know that's often a real issue in churches. You'll remember I'm an archdeacon, so I deal a lot with people who want an apology for something or other, real or imagined. And also thinking about our own patterns of life. Do you notice repeating cycles in your life or in the cycle of your church? And can they be invitations for healing and growth? So I suspect that you'll get put now into groups, and you'll kind of whoosh out into a group for 10 minutes, and there'll be a countdown, and then you'll whoosh back in, and I look forward to seeing your faces when that happens.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to attempt to create the breakout groups the first time ever. There will be 13 groups. When I can't actually see where I put a time there, but it may give me the option when I click create groups. When you, hopefully you'll see a timer in the group for 10 minutes, but if not, could somebody keep a record of the time and count down 10 minutes? And then when you leave the group, it'll probably give you two options. One is to leave the breakout group, and the other, I think, is to leave the meeting completely. So please make sure you leave the breakout group and come back to the main meeting, okay, when you click leave groups. So I'll do this now. Okay, so I've the breakout rooms should close automatically, technically. Time will tell. Hello there. You need to unmute yourself, Bishop.
David, my screen has broken up again, so I'm going to try and come back into the meeting on another device.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
If you can, are you the host or is it Mike?
It's myself, so I can, when you come into the waiting room, I should see you. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, both you, Martin. Hi, can you unmute yourself?
It's not often I'm asked to do that.
Have you both just come in, Emma and Martin?
Yeah, I made the schoolboy error of thinking it was 2 o'clock in the back of my mind, so try to get on it just before 2 and couldn't understand what was going on.
Oh, right. It was at 2 o'clock.
Ah, okay. And then it got updated. Then there was a second email went out to say the host had changed, isn't it?
So you thought it was 3 o'clock?
No, I thought it was 2 o'clock today, and I tried to get on at 2 o'clock.
Oh, right. It was going at 2 o'clock. That was the start time.
Oh, no, the link I had was said 3 o'clock because I couldn't get on at 2 o'clock.
Right.
So I've joined. I've come on now, thinking I'm having the well-being.
So, yeah. So what happened initially was that a link went out to everyone who'd registered saying that the meeting was at 2 o'clock. Sorry, that the meeting was at 3 o'clock. But then a subsequent link went out to say that the meeting had been amended to 2 o'clock.
Right, and you know that, and 2 o'clock I came on and I wasn't allowed on, and then I went back into my email. I thought maybe I've got the 2 the wrong way around, and
right.
I've come back on for 3 and obviously missed it.
Yeah. Well, no. You've missed most of it. But currently, 50-something people are in breakout rooms.
Right.
So they're coming. But you're currently in the main meeting, and they will all start filtering back in 6 minutes and 20-something seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got this wrong because I couldn't understand. Well, if that's the case, I don't know why I wasn't allowed in at 2 o'clock then. And,
That's strange.
Unless, of course, I was using the link for the 3 o'clock meeting.
It sounds like that may have been the case. But yeah, the 2 o'clock link seems to have let everybody else in. So I'm not sure why that's gone wrong for you. I can't answer the question, I'm afraid.
No, I might have deleted the wrong one of the 2 emails.
Right.
Because in my diary I got it down as 2 o'clock. But these things are changing constantly. I've clicked onto something this morning to agree acceptance, and then all of a sudden it's come back and said the host has changed the time, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. The issue with Zoom, right, is that if you set a meeting to a certain time, invariably sometimes it changes it. So you think clicking 2 o'clock. British time, but of course Zoom is American, so it's for some reason it alters times a little bit, and where each meeting is listed, it has 2 times. So for example, for this meeting it has 2 o'clock start, but it has 1 o'clock written just above it.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure what that 1 o'clock time is there for.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So in terms of this afternoon, how do you want me to play it? Because obviously you're the best part of an hour into this now, and I'm going to clear what's going on.
So what's happened is that Archdeacon Justine has given a presentation on Peter the Resilient Disciple. And what she's done now is I think she's asked people to think about several things. They've gone into breakout groups to discuss what's been heard and asked. And they're all going to come back and feed back. So you may want to listen to some of that.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you can unmute, Emma. Are you able to?
Do I need to send an apology to anybody, David?
Yes, she is.
No.
I'll just. It's just a technical difficulty.
Yes, so much is going into my junk folder, and I've just looked at it now, and I wrote that 3 o'clock down, and I haven't got anything to amend it. So big mistakes from me. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. I mean, it was confusing because one email went out confirming it and saying it was 3 o'clock, and then the error was realised, and then a subsequent one came out for 2 o'clock.
The stupid thing was with me. I said to Stuart yesterday, I said, we've got the CMD now tomorrow. I said, what time is it? And he said 2. And I thought, oh, right, okay. So we didn't take any more conversation. And I said, oh no, he meant 3. Oh, never mind. I won't say anything. He was right.
That's fair enough. I'm just looking at the breakout rooms. Yeah, Caroline Down's email went into her junk folder. And then when she went in to find it, it was there. She saw it.
No, my junk folder is a mystery, because some things I find then, some things I don't. I never see them again.
Yeah.
Well, I can go through a period with normal emails, then all of a sudden from that one person, they all go into the junk bin. I haven't done anything. I haven't changed anything. And then after a couple of weeks, they seem to reappear again,
Right. Oh, gosh.
The gremlins.
Gremlins. So they've got 2 minutes 40 something left.
What time are you due to finish, David? It must be at 3:30, is it?
That's the cut-off time, but it's not, it's a bit flexible really. So I suspect it'll be 3:15 now when everybody feeds back and question and answer session. I've recorded this, and we are being recorded now, actually. so,
So
so
the
you
diocese
hopefully
can realise how dull I am, is it? No?
well, I don't know if Matt can cut this bit out.
Please,
But,
Matt.
yeah, he's not actually here. He's in the cathedral doing bits and bobs at the minute. But yeah, hopefully Matt might be able to edit this, and then only the presentation is kept, and you can revisit it. You can see it, So time will tell. I'm really proud of myself that I actually created breakout rooms for the
I
first
haven't
time.
tried that yet, so I've been told all about it. So, I couldn't break in yet, alone break out.
Yeah. Are you both okay generally? Yeah.
Yeah.
Going a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine, Emma. You've got a lot on your mind at the minute.
Just a bit.
I just try to pour through all this stuff on reopening potentially.
Oh yeah.
Who do we classify as a vulnerable person? Earlier, I was told that anybody from 65 is offered a flu jab, and it's offered, not taken up, a flu jab, and minefield.
Yeah. Was it 70s plus who was shielding though? Were they the most vulnerable?
Yeah, but it does say offered a flu jab as well, and 65.
Oh, right.
65 is offered a flu jab, but that could rule out an awful lot of
Yeah.
parishes.
Well, yeah. Is that in the Church of Wales guidance?
No, it's a medical thing that I was told that the flu jabs are offered at 65. It refers you to the Welsh Government thing that says anybody that's shielding, and then it says offered the jab. Yeah.
Yeah. Looks like the breakout rooms are coming back, which is great. That's encouraging.
Well done, David.
Oof. A little miracle there, Mike.
The breakout room option hasn't appeared, I think, even though I'm the co-host. I think you've got sole control of that. So
Right.
The power is all yours.
I'll try not to let it get to my head. It says that people have got 74 seconds before they close automatically, I think. The speaker is still with us. That's the main thing. Still got quite a lot of people to come. Ten seconds left. And open all rooms. I think I need to press. Oh, close all rooms. Okay, are we all back in here now? I think we are. Possibly. Bear with me. Yep, I think we're all back. Okay, Justine, over to you.
Well, really, this is just an opportunity for you to make any comments or ask any questions, and for there to be a little time for that. And I'm kind of hoping David might host that, or host that,
Yep.
and say, we've all had enough now, it's time to go, that sort of thing.
No problem at all. Would people like to do, you can put thumbs up and things like that in the participants section. Let me just let the bishop back in a minute. Right, that's done. So I'll keep a little eye out for any, would anybody like to make any comments, observations, or ask any questions of Archdeacon Justine? I'm scanning participants. If
I won't be offended if not.
If I don't see you indicate, please just talk. Maybe Mark Greenaway Robbins, I think.
Good afternoon, thank you. I'm wondering, my experience of parish life is that there are occasions when the bowl breaks and parishioners want it to stay broken on the ground and don't want it glued back together. And sometimes that can be a power move. Sometimes it can be a fear of not knowing what the new bowl would be like and that experience. You get the suggestion in the image. So I wonder if you've any wisdom or thoughts on how we as faithful pastors respond to those who just don't want the bowl glued back together.
The scriptural verse that comes to my mind is, wipe the dust from your feet and let your peace return to you. I think my experience of being in conflict in parishes, so as an archdeacon, so go in as a mediator or dealing sometimes with complaints against the clergy, when there is somebody who is quite certain of their own position or rightness, or unwilling to move in any way, they just want blood, as it were, you have to seal that and protect yourself from it. And there are times when that is the case. And so saying something like, you can offer someone a mediation if somebody doesn't want it and won't have it. You have to wait on God for yourself, and you continue to hold it in prayer, but the chronos time will carry on, but it may not be the kairos moment. And I have found that sense of, so I might come stamping back home, and that verse, to wipe the dust from my feet, to gently wipe, not to stamp about or to sit down after I've stamped about, to wipe the dust from my feet and let my peace return to me, because I've offered something of my peace or something of who I am. And it's been rejected, and I need to be attentive and gentle with myself, as Christ is with me in holding me. So I think it's very real that, the break for Judas, the break of day meant the break. It wasn't a new day. And it's tough, but we are not the saviour. And that's these things that I say to myself. I am not the saviour. We have a saviour. I can take my part. So I think it's real, and I think one needs to know about protecting our own piece, laying it down gently.
Thank you.
Michael Gable, did I see a hand for you? No. Anyone else? Comments or questions? Caroline Downs, I think, is waving at me. You need to unmute yourself, Caroline.
I just wanted to say that we said in our little group that we really liked the image, and somebody else said before, of the broken bowl, because it was a beautiful image, and that's what stayed in my mind, because we're never going to make the bowl, whatever the bowl signifies. If the bowl is the church, we can't make it perfect, because humanity isn't perfect. And there's something about, sounds like I'm going to start singing a hymn, but I'm not. You know, there's something about beauty in brokenness, isn't there? And we're all, in some sense, broken vessels. And I think that sometimes we have to be careful that our vulnerability and brokenness doesn't infect other people, and that we are not too broken that we can't continue to be ministers of God's love and compassion. But I just love that broken image. And Peggy said something useful. I don't mean to make that sound as if she doesn't normally, but she said that the healing of the bowl, what you put between the cracks, can't be, you know, it's just got to be just the right texture to hold it together, not to make it necessarily rock solid so that it could never come apart again. Or not. Was that right, Peggy? Have I got you right, Peggy?
It was about what Justine said about the pressure you need to hold the bowl, hold the parts together while the glue is working.
Yeah.
Not too much and not too little. That was the...
Exactly. And if you sealed it completely, there's no space for anything new to come. The end.
Yes. Yes. No, thank you for sort of exploring a little bit more the image. I found it a really helpful one, and I read a little bit more about Japanese philosophy, the philosophy behind it, which I found really helpful, which is a philosophy of imperfection. That actually the story of a thing, something is more precious,
yeah,
because you can see the story in it. You know, like, you know, the beautiful face. Is it the beautiful face of a 20-year-old where there are no lines, no laughter lines, let alone frown lines? Or is there a beauty of the saintly, much older face where you can see something of the story within it? And in Western philosophy and culture, things need to be symmetrical, and they need to be kind of, I might say, clinical or perfect. And we have a certain sort of, it has to be solid, and it has to be forever. Whereas, you know, we are shaped by that, but it's not necessarily Christian, and it's not a lot of the Eastern philosophy, you know, cultural stuff, which is just more about cycles and patterns, and ebb and flow. And I found that quite, it's helpful to, you know, the Leonard Cohen is forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything, but you still ring the bell. You still get up the next day. You know, that's been helpful. Thank you for drawing out some more things, Caroline.
Stephen Kirk.
Right, the technology worked. I hadn't really, in lockdown, of course, we do all sorts of things we wouldn't dream of doing before. And one of the things that I've been doing that I wouldn't have dreamt of doing is watching more television and The Repair Shop. Now, if you watch The Repair Shop, you can bring in a bowl that is broken to pieces, and it can be put together again, and you can't see any of the joins or the cracks. Now, I've been reflecting on that as you've spoken, and one of the things it seems to me is that that is no longer the same bowl, because it isn't the bowl that has been cracked, It is something that has been remade and is different. And I rather like, you know, your cracked bowl that has the gold lines on it, because you can see what it's been through. Some of those who bring in items to the repair shop, they say, oh, I want that dent to remain. I want that, I don't want it to be in a brand new condition. I want to be able to see what it's been through. And I think that is more authentic, because it actually tells the story of the item, of the thing. And presumably, if we apply that to ourselves, it's all of those cracks and that brokenness that tells the story of who we are and what we have become, and explains very often why we are where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And that requires such a lot of self-acceptance, doesn't it? And maturity and self-acceptance. I'm just thinking about, you know, when I prang my car, though, I take it into the repair shop and I want nobody to know that I've, you know, it's you know, how do we, those things reveal how we want something repaired. They reveal to us, don't they? So where, you know, where our vulnerabilities are. But that thing about, I think that's really interesting, that thing about it being a replacement effectively, rather than what does it mean to be remade. And of course in the Bible there are lots of Jeremiah and the pottery, and it's an image of growth, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Pauline Smith, I think, has a hand up.
Oh, hiya. Yeah, one of my favourite saying when I'm in a bad place is St. Paul saying, when I'm weak, I'm strong. I think there's a lot of strength in weakness. When we're broken and when we are in a bad place, or when we're struggling, that's when we're tested to our limits. That's when sometimes we think, oh my gosh, I've done this, I've gone through this, I found a solution to this. And it's when we find our strength. And I also feel that when you're broken, or when you're at a low place, that's when you connect to God a little bit more. Your prayer life strengthens. So I'm a big fan of that saying of St. Paul, because weakness is a strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly my experience of faith and life. And I know, as you do, as a pastor, one has to be very, very careful when somebody is in a very low place or a weak place in the Pauline language that you're using, not to sort of say, well, that's a good place to be because it, you know, it's character building. It's how we hold others, because you can use that bowl image or the weakness and strong image to say, well, when someone else is in that place, how might I support, is a word we'd use, isn't it? Support them, and also hold on. I think one of the reasons why I put the 23rd Psalm in, I'm very struck by that sense that God wants us to flourish. It's not all about being miserable, and sometimes using some of this resilience stuff, it's, you know, adversity is what we want because it makes us grow, and that's true, but God's desire for our life, you know, is that we might be also led into places where there are still waters. But for me, the resilience thing is about the table in the midst of those who trouble me, or in the midst of my enemies. There, a table is prepared to provide for me on that, you know, on that whole journey. So I think you're right. The brokenness appeals hugely, and I find when I've done this sort of thing as a workshop through a day, you know, and people have made things with gold, it can be quite difficult to get people off the brokenness, the first stage, because we all understand that. And to get people to the openness and vulnerability and courage of being held by God for however long it takes, and from there to be used again and to discern what that is, you know, those are sort of steps further on. And the reason I like the image of the bowl is because it it gives us all of those, rather than just going, if we talk about St. Peter, we go, oh yes, he was the one who denied Jesus, as if that's all there's to say. And I'm a big fan of saying, actually, there's a journey.
Okay, I'm going to do one last scan of the Zoom, just to see if anybody else wants to add any final questions or comments. I'm not seeing anything.
That's fine.
So thank you, Justine, for receiving those observations and questions. And thank you to all, great, thank you. And thank you to all of those who shared what they did. I hope you found this webinar helpful in reflecting on your own well-being and, of course, the well-being of those in your care. It's important that we look after ourselves, we hold each other in prayer, and, of course, particularly hold in prayer those who are unable to be with us at this point in time because they may be struggling or because they're dealing with things that we don't see. So we need to look out for each other. It's fundamentally important. And I'm going to hand now to the Bishop for some closing remarks to bring our time to a close.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for those who've set up this afternoon in the background. But most of all, thank you, Justine. It's absolutely guaranteed that the next time we drop a bowl, we will see it as a spiritual encounter. Okay. I just want you to remind people, because I know that much of what you've given us in the last 90 minutes, I'm certainly going to take away certain images and phrases and aspects of Peter's story that I will ponder on. Could you tell us again, if you will, what you've written, so that if anybody does want to have a bit more of you, they can find it?
Sure. Okay, so my name, Justine Allain Chapman, that will take you quite a long way on Amazon or equivalent. Resilient Pastors, which the subtitle of which is The Role of Adversity in Healing and Growth. So Resilient Pastors is a book you will sort of read in theological education. It's in the SPCK Library of Pastoral Care. So it does stuff around the desert, Rowan Williams, desert Christians of the 4th and 5th century. That's got that sort of stuff in it. And then I've written a book that's called The Resilient Disciple. And that is and it's for Lent. So there are 40 reflections for Lent, and there's material so that you can do it as a Lent book, because you can grow with groups. And in each of those, so there are weeks, obviously, in Lent, and one of the weeks is falling, one of the weeks is faithful, one of the weeks is fruitful. And within that, so you do follow the story of Peter in that. So that's quite a good Lent. It doesn't have to be read in Lent, in fact, but it's a hook, it's a publishing hook. But if some of you are interested in resilience during lockdown, if you were to go onto the Church Times online and type in my name, you will see I've written A to Z of lockdown. And if you went on my Facebook page, which is open, you can see these A to Zs. There's a picture and about 300 or so words, and you can share them in your parish magazine every week for 26 weeks or every day for a little bit, should you want to do that. I did that at the beginning of lockdown. Every day. I got to about D and I thought, oh no, you started on something now. So what I wanted to do in lockdown was just to write some reflections, but they are on resilience, on every day. So just as a gift, if you like, for what it's worth, for my clergy or anybody I know to be able to share those. So if that's useful for you to use 1 or 2 or 26, do.
Thank you ever so much, Justine. That's great. Yes, I've read your A to Z of resilience, and what I enjoyed so much about it is that it's actually quite hard to describe what the experience of lockdown has been for many of us. So I commend it to people. We want to wish you God's blessing on your multifaceted ministry. give our greetings and our love to the Diocese of Lincoln. And I'm going to say goodbye. David, is there anything else that we need to say to our friends and colleagues?
I think, yep, it's all good. We'll just bring the meeting to a close.
Lovely. Well, in that case, God bless you all, and I will see most of you again shortly. And Justine, go well.
Thank you. God bless you all too.